Hey, and welcome to this week's coaching video for those of you who are going to be facilitating the discussion for your off-campus small group. This video is designed to help to get you ready for that. So if you're going to be leading one of Dayspring's small groups on the week of March the 30th, then this video is designed to help you out, all right? So grab your discussion guide. I'm going to talk you through it and just kind of look over it with you and make sure that you're ready to go and feel fully equipped to lead your discussion this week, all right? Look at the handout, and as you do that, let me kind of share the big picture of what you're going to be doing this week. You're going to be reinforcing in your discussion what we're really going to be talking about Sunday, and really what we've been talking about all through this series of Possessed. In this Possessed series, we've been talking about the fact that we really need to give God everything in our life. And the reason we can do that is because we can trust Him with it. We can trust God with our very lives. Certainly we can trust Him with every detail of our life. Well, this week we're going to conclude that sermon series, and this small group discussion is going to really kind of tie a knot and tie a bow on the things that we've been talking about. We can trust God. We can really trust Him with our lives. And what you're going to be doing is the focus of the sermon is going to do with the different attributes of God that allow us to trust God. And here are some words, some attributes of God that you might want to be familiar with as a small group leader. For example, the term omnipresence. We talk about God's omnipresence. That means that God is everywhere. We talk about God's omnipotence. That means that God has all power. He is all powerful. We talk about God's omniscience. That means that God is all knowing. And then, of course, we talk about the fact that God is love. That means that He is all good. So what you're really doing in this lesson is you're going to be pushing a little deeper as we think about those attributes, and you're really going to lock in on one attribute in particular, God's omniscience, what God knows. Okay, so your discussion is going to kind of get everybody in that vein. Now, let's look at the handout itself. Discussion point number 1, that's your recap discussion, where you look at a little bit of the passage that we study on Sunday, and then everybody kind of recaps, maybe if they took some notes and those sort of things. And of course, as the group facilitator this week, you need to take some notes throughout the sermon, because that'll allow you to help get this ball rolling here on discussion point number 1, all right? But once you kind of get things going and everybody's now talking about what they heard Sunday or what they learned or took away from them, then you move on into the discussion itself, the study itself. Look at discussion point number 2. Now this is really interesting. It says, think about these 3 attributes of God: Him being all-powerful, Him being all-knowing, and Him being all-loving. Think about those 3 attributes. God can do anything He wants to do. God knows how to do anything that He wants to do. And what God wants to do is good, because God is love. Now look at the question that's posed here on discussion point number 2. If you removed any one of those attributes of God, how would it affect your ability to trust Him with total ownership of your life? Think about it. If God was a good God and knew everything, but He wasn't all powerful, how would that affect your ability to trust Him? Well, it would, because even though God would want to do the right thing and even knew how to do the right thing, if He didn't have the power to do it, or say God wasn't all-knowing. What if God was all-powerful and God was good, but He didn't know everything? He didn't know how to do what He had the power to do. Well, again, that would affect our ability to trust Him. Or take away that 3rd attribute, all-loving. This might be the most frightening of all. Because of what if God could do anything He wanted to do, and He knew how to do anything He wanted to do, but He had bad character? If He wasn't good, what a frightening prospect is that, right? So this is just showing that if God was not everything that He is, we wouldn't really be able to trust Him. But because He is everything that He is, we can trust Him completely with our lives. Now, having said that, you're going to move into that part where it's going to delve into His omniscience, what God knows, because this really is pretty cool when we think it through, and that's what you're going to help your group do. Discussion point number 4, you're going to move, or discussion point number 3, excuse me, you're going to look at Mark chapter 14, and you're going to look at several things in this chapter, but you're going to start off, as you see, looking at verses 12 through 16. Now, in these verses, we see where Jesus is getting ready to go to the cross, but He sends His disciples on ahead to set up the Passover meal. And as you look at that passage in Mark chapter 14, it's pretty remarkable. Jesus says, here's what I want you guys to do, talking to his disciples. I want you to go to this specific area. You're going to find a guy doing a specific thing. He's going to have this. I mean, it really sounds, pretty specific what Jesus says these guys are going to discover when they go into a certain town. And everything happens exactly as they say. I mean, I'm just going to read this to you. It says, Jesus, he told his disciples to go and make preparations for the Passover. Then verse 13. So he sent two of his disciples, and he said to them, go into the city, and you'll find a man carrying a jar of water, and he'll meet you. Follow him. Then say to the owner of the house that he enters, the teacher asks, where is my guest room, that I may prepare the Passover for my disciples? He'll show you a large upper room, furnished and ready, so make preparations there. And then it says, the disciples left, went to the city, found things just as Jesus told them. So think about it. Jesus said, go to a city and look for a guy who's carrying a pail of water around. When you find him, tell him to take you somewhere. He'll take you somewhere. That'll go to a home where a guy's going to have everything that you need to set up the Passover. Now imagine, and this is what discussion point number 3 says, what would you have been thinking if you were one of the disciples? I mean, would you have thought, wow, how did Jesus know this would happen? I mean, did he line things up ahead of time? And even if he did, how would it still work out correctly? Did Jesus just make a good guess here? I mean, what in the world happened? Obviously, you would be thinking, Jesus clearly knows things that we don't. How he knew it, I'm not really sure. Now, look at discussion point number 4. Now it's going to press it even further. Once they get there and they're having the Passover meal, look at verses 17 through 20. Now, in verses 17 through 20, just kind of let me recap that for you. Jesus tells the disciples that one of them is going to betray him. And they're kind of confused by this, and they're thinking, surely not me. And Jesus says, the one who dips his bread in the bowl next, he's the one. And sure enough, guess who does it? Judas. So Jesus predicts who specifically is going to betray him. Now after that, you're going to read verses 27 through 30. Now you know what this one's about? This is when Jesus tells the disciples, actually, you're all going to run away from me. And Peter's like, no, Jesus, I would never do that. And Jesus says, before the rooster crows a couple times, you'll deny me 3 times. Before the rooster crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times. And guess what? That exact thing happened. So now Jesus isn't just, earlier we saw him make a prediction about what was going on in the present. He said, you go to a specific area, you'll find a specific guy doing this specific thing. Now he's saying, and I'll even tell you what's about to happen. And he does it with precision. I mean, with accuracy. He talks about exactly what's going to happen. Now look back at your handout. Discussion point number 4. It says, so between Jesus telling the disciples to go and make Passover preparations, and then his specific words about his future betrayal, we're reminded of something, and here it is. Jesus knows everything about our past, our present, and our future. Think about that. Jesus knows about our past, he knows about our present, he knows about our future. Now we would say, well, yeah, but he's all-knowing. He's omniscient. Now here's what's remarkable. And by the way, here's some great things for you to look up. If you want to look up some extra passages that are not in this discussion guide, I encourage you to look these up because you may use them as part of your discussion in making this point that Jesus really does know everything about what's going on. Look at John chapter 4. John chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. Look that one up and see what Jesus tells this woman about her own life. Mark chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. Mark chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. And see what Jesus says there, what he knows about even what some people are thinking. Matthew 17, I love this one. Matthew chapter 17, verses 24 through 27. Read that one and tell me Jesus doesn't know pretty much everything. I mean, he knows everything. So we look at this and we say, okay, Jesus knows everything that's going on in the world. He even knows what we're thinking. He knows what's going to happen in the future. He's omniscient. Now, here's the remarkable thing. Jesus knows what was, what is, and what is to come, right? What's remarkable is that he knows even more than that. You say, how could Jesus know more than everything that was, is, and will be? Look at discussion point number 5. It says, amazingly, Jesus knows more than just the past, present, and future. Now you're going to look back at your Mark 14 passage again, okay? This is the one you've been reading from. Look back at verses 20 and 21. Jesus talks about the one who's going to betray him. And then in verse 20, Jesus says, it would have been better for him if he had never even been born. So here's my point in this. Jesus doesn't just know what was, is, and will be. Jesus even knows the what if scenarios. Jesus knows, what if this happened instead of what really will happen? Jesus even knows that. So Jesus knows not just the reality of what was, is, and is to come. Jesus even knows things that never even will happen. Think about that. He knows what has happened, is happening, and will happen. And then he knows all of the hypothetical what ifs if scenarios change. So Jesus knows literally everything there is to know and then some. That's crazy, isn't it? Here's some things you might want to look up as it relates to this, Jesus knowing the what if scenarios. Look up Matthew 11, verse 23. Again, where Jesus is going to say, hey, even if this, then here's what I know. I know how it would play out. Matthew chapter 12, verses 6 through 8. Another example where Jesus knows even the hypothetical situations. By the way, in philosophical circles and in theological circles, this is what's referred to, talking about Jesus knowing the what-if scenarios, this is referred to as God's middle knowledge. That's the technical term for this. So not only does God know what is and what will be and what has been, he also has this middle knowledge of things that never even will be. So pretty interesting, isn't it? If you're interested in that, I mean, if you're a reader and you say, boy, I'd really like to dive into that a little more, here's a good resource for you. A book called Salvation and Sovereignty. Salvation and Sovereignty by a guy by the name of Kenneth Keathley. Keathley. Kenneth Keathley. A book called Salvation and Sovereignty. If you're interested in God's omniscience, including his middle knowledge, that might be something you enjoy reading. If you do enjoy reading it, you're probably a bit strange. All right? But anyway, this is the point. Here's the point. Jesus knows everything. And when we say everything, we mean everything. Past, present, future, middle knowledge, everything. He's omniscient. And this brings us to the kicker of the lesson. Look at discussion point number 6. Knowing all there is to know about you. Jesus is omniscient about you. He knows everything you've done. He knows everything you're doing. He knows everything you will do. He knows what you're thinking. He knows your heart. He even knows what you would do if he gave you the opportunity to do it. Some things you'll never do just because the opportunity wasn't there. Jesus knows that you would have done them anyway. Jesus knows everything there is to know about you. And he loves you still. That's the whole point of this lesson. That an omniscient God would love me is staggering. To be known and loved, that's a God beyond our comprehension. So it ends with this discussion point number 7, which is just one that you read. Let's let this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God direct our lives. Let's willingly trust him with our past, our present, and our future. See, God can be trusted. He can be trusted with our lives more than we can be trusted with our own lives. Because he knows more than we do. He can do what we can not do. He is places where we are not. And he loves us even more than we love ourselves. So let's trust him with our lives. Hey, I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope that this lesson, this discussion, goes really well with your small group. And I hope it does stagger the mind a little bit to realize that an all-knowing God loves us the way that he does. All right? Hey, thanks for listening in. Hope your small group goes well. I'm certain that it will. God bless you, and we'll see you Sunday.